Trigger warning. This video contains descriptions of extreme violence, domestic abuse, and disturbing content, including details of a brutal murder. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to address something. Some of you may remember that I covered the tragic case of Jenean Chapman when news first broke of her murder. At the time, we were left with unanswered questions, a life taken too soon, a suspect in custody, and a family desperate for justice. But now, after months of waiting, the trial has finally concluded. With new developments, it's time to revisit this story, this time with the full picture.
The verdict is in.
The late September heat in Dallas was relentless. 86 degrees, thick with humidity, the kind that clings to your skin. By early afternoon on Monday, the sun bore down on the city's towering high-rises, casting long shadows into the streets below. Inside one of those buildings, an unsettling silence hung in the air. At 1:15 p.m., 2 Dallas police officers arrived. They weren't responding to a frantic 911 call or reports of a disturbance. This was a welfare check, just a routine knock on the door. But what they were about to walk into was anything but routine. Janine Chapman's HR manager had made the call. Janine, a woman known to be dependable, prompt, and highly professional, had built a reputation for excellence after years of working with high-profile figures like Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, and Russell Simmons at Def Jam. Not showing up without notice was unthinkable for her. But now, on Monday, September 25th, 2023, she was nowhere to be found. As the officers stepped onto her floor, the first thing they noticed wasn't the door. It was the air. Thick, unmistakable, a stench that sent a wave of nausea rolling through them. They didn't have to say it. They knew. One of them knocked firmly.
Dallas Police Department.
Silence. Another knock. Louder this time.
Ms. Chapman, this is a welfare check. We need you to open the door.
Still, nothing. They exchanged glances. There was no movement from inside, no sound. Just that thick, cloying smell creeping into the hallway. Carefully, they proceeded inside. The apartment was eerily quiet. The air was dense, heavy with something more than just the heat. The mess in the living room suggested disorder. Clothes, papers, scattered belongings. But it was what lay beyond that stopped them in their tracks. The bedroom. A toppled nightstand. A lamp on the floor. Blood. Dark, pooled, streaked across the room. And there, on the bed, was Janine. Motionless. Lifeless. Her body told a story. A horrifying one. Bruising around her neck and eyes. Disturbing lacerations around her mouth. Blunt force trauma to her head. Then, the realization settled in. A devastating truth that could not be undone. Janine Chapman had been murdered. This is the story of Janine Chapman. A story of love, control, and betrayal at the hands of the one closest to her. Welcome back to Sleuthy Stories, where we dive into real-life mysteries, piecing together the truth one clue at a time. If by the end of this video, you enjoy how we present these stories and the journey of discovering the clues alongside the detectives, we'd be honored if you'd like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. To continue bringing you in-depth, well-researched stories, we rely on the support of sponsors like the sponsor of today's video, Aura, a comprehensive service that protects you and your loved ones from those who wish to exploit your trust online. Ever get one of those strange text messages from USPS saying they have a package for you? Click this link to confirm. USPS never sends those types of messages. That's spam from scammers who likely got your information from a data broker or a leak on the dark web. Do you know how much of your personal information is out there? Your full name, phone number, home address, email, even details about your relatives can be sold to scammers, like the ones behind that USPS text message. That's why I turn to Aura. Aura not only monitors your information on the dark web, but it also automatically sends opt-out requests to data brokers on your behalf. It has helped me remove my information from over 18 data brokers, and even alerted me that one of my email addresses was found on the dark web. With Aura, I also enjoy features like antivirus, VPN, password management, and identity theft insurance, all in one affordable package. If you sign up through my link right now at aura.com/sleuthylucy, Aura will give you a 2-week free trial. For a more direct route, click the link in the description below. It was early afternoon at the office where Janine Chapman worked. The lunch hour was winding down. Co-workers returned to their desks, skimming emails, finishing coffee, making plans for the rest of the day. No one expected that a single missing employee would be cause for alarm. But in an apartment miles away, a silence had settled. A silence that had gone on far too long. At 1:15 p.m., 2 officers arrived at the high-rise on Elm Street. It was a routine welfare check, something they'd done 100 times before. As they stepped out of their cruiser, the Dallas heat pressed down. 86 degrees. Humid. The air hung heavy, stagnant. Inside, the building was quiet. The officers rode the elevator up, the soft mechanical hum filling the silence. The hallway stretched before them, empty, still. Then something hit them, a smell. It crept in slowly at first, barely noticeable. But with each step, it grew stronger, turning from an unfamiliar staleness to something that prickled at the edges of their instincts. They had smelled this before, and it was never a good sign. One of them knocked.
Dallas Police Department.
Nothing. Another knock, louder.
Ms. Chapman, we need you to open the door.
Still nothing. They listened. No footsteps. No movement. Only the suffocating stillness pressing in from all sides. The lead officer reached for his radio. The request was made. The door needed to be checked. When they finally stepped inside, it took only seconds to see it. The living room was a disarray of belongings. But beyond that, in the bedroom, a different kind of chaos. This wasn't just a mess. This was violence. A toppled nightstand, a fallen lamp, and then the body. Jenean Chapman lay motionless. Her skin bore the unmistakable signs of rage. Bruises strangled the skin around her neck. Her eyes, swollen and darkened. Deep lacerations cut into her mouth. Her head struck with such force that blunt trauma had left its mark. Then the radio crackled to life.
It's a black female. Said they haven't heard from her since Wednesday.
A long pause. Then a voice returned, calm, certain, and chilling.
It's going to be a 27 for sure.
A police code. One that meant only one thing: murder. Born on July 18, 1977, Janine Chapman entered the world with a spirit as radiant as a summer sunrise. She spent her early years between New Jersey and Jamaica, a blend of cultures that shaped her into a woman who was both ambitious and deeply rooted in family. She was a daughter, a sister, and a friend. To those who knew her, she was the person you called when you needed a laugh, a kind word, or simply someone to listen. Academically driven, Janine pursued her passion for storytelling and media at Syracuse University, earning a degree in TV, film, and production. She saw the world through a creative lens, always seeking to capture stories that mattered. Her career would take her to remarkable places. Janine's determination led her into high-profile circles. She began as a personal assistant to Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, a role that introduced her to a world of diplomacy and precision. The Duchess later described her as loyal, hardworking, and a joy to be around. From there, Janine's career flourished. She transitioned into the music industry, working at Def Jam, where she rubbed elbows with the likes of Russell Simmons. She was ambitious, driven, not just a professional, but a force in her field. Despite the prestige of her roles, she remained humble, kind, and deeply devoted to the people she loved. She was always thinking ahead, envisioning the next chapter of her life, one that blended her corporate success with her entrepreneurial spirit. But in matters of the heart, she sought something more. In 2018, while working in San Francisco, Janine met James Patrick. Their connection was undeniable. James was charismatic and charming, with an energy that could light up a room. He had a way of making Janine laugh, of making her feel seen in a way she hadn't before. Their conversations flowed effortlessly, from their favorite films to their dreams of the future. They built a relationship on shared moments and quiet understanding, navigating career changes, city moves, and the everyday highs and lows of life together. Like any couple, they had their differences. James was spontaneous, sometimes unpredictable, while Janine was thoughtful and measured. She had always been independent, fiercely so, while James thrived in the comfort of companionship. But what they shared was real. For 6 years, their relationship ebbed and flowed, yet always found its way back. In May 2023, when Janine took a career opportunity in Dallas, Texas, James was right by her side. And in July 2023, they made it official. Marriage had always been something Janine dreamed of, a union built on love, commitment, and shared ambitions. So, when she and James exchanged vows, it felt like the beginning of something new. Together, they settled into their upscale Dallas high-rise, a space filled with the promise of a future they would build together. Her family was surprised by the suddenness of their union, but Janine was happy. She had chosen love, and for her, that was enough. But life is unpredictable. Janine, who had always been so present, so reliable, suddenly fell silent. By Monday, September 25, 2023, she hadn't shown up for work, and no one had heard from her in days. At 1:15 p.m., her employer placed a call. A welfare check was requested, and what police would find behind that apartment door would change everything.
When officers arrived to these apartments in the 1400 block of Elm Street in downtown Dallas, they were acting on a wellness check after 46-year-old Jenean Chapman didn't show up for work. Officers found her dead inside her unit.
It had been 5 days since Janine Chapman had last been seen at work. Monday, September 25th was the day she was expected to return after taking the previous week off. She had informed her HR manager that she needed time away due to domestic issues, a reason that, in hindsight, carried far more weight than anyone could have imagined. When she failed to show up that morning, her absence set off alarms. Janine was always professional, always reliable. But now, no calls, no texts, just silence. By early afternoon, concern turned to fear. A welfare check was requested. The sun cast sharp shadows across Dallas as detectives arrived at the upscale high-rise on 1400 Elm Street. The routine call had led patrol officers to a grim discovery: Janine's lifeless body in her apartment. Now, seasoned homicide detectives stood at the threshold, ready to unravel the mystery of what had happened inside those walls. Crossing into the apartment, they noted the disarray: a toppled nightstand, a fallen lamp, and blood staining the bedroom floor. The air was thick, not just with the metallic scent of blood, but with questions. Who could have committed such a brutal act? Why would anyone want to harm Janine, a woman known for such kindness? The detectives began their methodical examination. They observed signs of a violent struggle, indicating that Janine had fought fiercely against her assailant. There were no immediate signs of forced entry, suggesting she might have known her attacker. As the investigators meticulously pieced together the evidence, they formulated initial theories. Was this a crime of passion, or had Janine been targeted for another reason? Each clue uncovered seemed to lead to more questions, deepening the enigma surrounding her death. The path to justice was shrouded in uncertainty, but the detectives were resolute. With each passing hour, the urgency to find answers intensified, propelling them deeper into the labyrinth of Jenean Chapman's life and untimely death. When tragedy strikes, someone has to deliver the news. For Ann Marshall, that moment came on September the 25th, 2023. Detectives made the dreaded visit, the kind no parent should ever have to experience. They arrived in person, their expressions grave, their voices careful. They had one mission: to inform a mother that her daughter was gone.
Mrs. Marshall, we're so sorry to inform you. Janine had been found in her Dallas apartment. She had been murdered.
The moment stretched into a painful stillness, where time seemed to collapse under the weight of grief. Anne's hands trembled, her lips quivering as she struggled to form words that no mother should ever have to say. No, not Janine. Her breath hitched. Who would do this to her? Her daughters, Shireen, Crystal, and Nicole, would soon after learn of their sister's fate. The shock was immediate. Questions followed. The detectives didn't answer immediately. Instead, one leaned forward, his voice steady but firm.
That's what we need your help with. We know this is difficult, but anything you can tell us about Janine's recent experiences or relationships will be incredibly valuable to our investigation. Was there anyone she had problems with? Anyone who might have wanted to hurt her?
A heavy pause. Then Shireen spoke first.
James.
The name hung in the air like a cold draft. She continued, her voice steady.
James Patrick.
Another voice broke in.
She married James Patrick a few months ago. It was fast. We were shocked. We didn't see this coming at all. She had always talked about wanting the ring, the gown, the flowers, but there was no formal wedding. They eloped.
There was a hesitation, as if measuring how much to say. Janine's sister exhaled sharply, her jaw tightening.
They were together for years before that, but it was rocky.
The detectives exchanged glances.
Rocky how?
A deep breath. Then the words spilled out.
They were off and on. When it was good, it was good. But when it was bad,
A pause. Then, finally,
they were separating. She told us things were getting bad between them.
the detective took notes, nodding.
What do you mean by bad?
The sisters collectively swallowed hard, glancing at each other before one spoke.
A few weeks ago, she told me he choked her. She passed out.
The detective's pen paused mid-scratch.
Did she report this to the police?
The sisters shook their heads, tears slipping down their faces. One said, no. She wanted to handle it herself. She thought he'd change. The room fell dead silent.
When exactly did this happen?
Not long before she moved to Dallas, we begged her to leave him, to come stay with us.
One of them let out a small, bitter laugh, void of humor.
She thought she could fix it. She always believed in people like that. Janine was charmed by his magnetism, but we saw through his mask. He was arrogant, obnoxious. We never truly liked him.
Another sister spoke, her voice quieter but firm.
It wasn't long before circumstances made us worry even more. Janine was always financially stable, but James, he was different. She supported him a lot. He lost jobs frequently. If he got caught cheating, he'd twist things and accuse Janine of cheating. Gaslighting was his go-to. He had a way of making her feel like she should be grateful he was even in the relationship.
The detectives had heard enough to form a theory. But now, they had one more painful request.
Mrs. Marshall, I know this is incredibly difficult, but we need someone to confirm Janine's identity.
Anne clutched her chest, her breath catching. The silence that followed was long, heavy, suffocating. One of her daughters exhaled sharply.
I'll do it.
The detective gave a slow nod.
We can arrange for you to go to the medical examiner's office when you're ready. We'll walk you through everything.
There was nothing else to say. Only the harsh reality of what had to be done. As the family grappled with their devastating loss, the detectives now had their first real lead. Janine's marriage had been unraveling. Her final conversations with her family suggested fear, a need to leave. And now, her estranged husband's name was the first to come up. But was James Patrick responsible? Or was there someone else lurking beneath the surface? With Jenean Chapman's body discovered, detectives wasted no time expanding their investigation. Their first step, speaking to those who might have heard or seen something unusual in the days leading up to her death. Several neighbors came forward with disturbing accounts.
I could hear them arguing all the time through the walls.
It wasn't just normal fights. It got loud. Sometimes it was mostly her yelling. Other times I heard both of them.
The reports painted a picture of turmoil, a relationship riddled with explosive arguments that didn't go unnoticed by those living nearby. But in the days before Janine was found, the apartment had gone eerily silent. Investigators worked quickly to reconstruct the critical timeline. September 20th, 2023. Janine requested time off from work, citing domestic issues. Surveillance footage captured James Patrick at the apartment complex, loading furniture into a vehicle. September 21st. James Patrick returned to Janine's apartment. He spent several hours inside before leaving. September 22nd. James Patrick was seen on the premises again. This was the last recorded sighting of him at the apartment. September 25th. Concerned colleagues realized they had not heard from Janine in several days. A welfare check was requested, leading to the discovery of her body. The gap between September 22nd and September 25th became the investigators' focal point. What had happened inside that apartment during those crucial days? From the start, one name stood out. James Patrick, Janine's husband, the last known person to see her alive. The more they learned, the more concerning the picture became. The family's testimony, combined with the neighbors' reports of frequent arguments, raised serious red flags. And then, there was the security footage, showing James Patrick moving furniture out of Janine's apartment just days before her body was found. What was he taking? And why? While detectives followed every possible lead, no other suspect had the same level of motive and opportunity. Janine had been planning to leave James Patrick. Her family never liked him. He was unemployed, financially dependent on her, and prone to gaslighting and manipulation. And now, neighbors have come forward, describing explosive fights that echoed through the walls. On September 26, just one day after Janine's body was discovered, the Dallas County Medical Examiner's Office ruled her death a homicide. With confirmation that Janine had been murdered, detectives immediately turned their attention back to James Patrick. That's when they made another discovery. James Patrick had checked himself into a hospital in Austin, nearly 200 miles away. They now had a location. On September 25th, the same day Janine's body was discovered, James checked into Del Seaton Medical Center in Austin, claiming he needed treatment for an adverse reaction to an unknown substance. But it wasn't his symptoms that raised suspicion. It was the bloodied, blackened fingernail. A nurse asked him how he got it. His response: "I got in a fight with my wife." A confession, hidden in plain sight. But it wasn't a doctor's report that led to his arrest. It was the medical examiner's ruling, combined with witness testimony, surveillance footage, and James's suspicious movements, that sealed his fate. On September 26, just one day after Janine's body was discovered, detectives made their move. They had evidence, surveillance footage, witness testimony, and the official homicide ruling. But perhaps the most damning piece of all? James's own words. While receiving treatment at Del Seaton Medical Center, he had admitted to being in a fight with his wife. A statement that, in light of Janine's brutal murder, was more than just an offhand remark. It was incriminating. With the help of the University of Texas Police Department, Dallas authorities tracked James down and placed him under arrest. He was charged with murder and held at Travis County Jail before being extradited to Dallas. His bond was set at $1 million. For detectives, the first battle was won. But for Janine's family, the pain was just beginning. After days of agonizing uncertainty, the news finally reached Janine's family. James Patrick had been arrested.
An arrest has been made in the Jenean Chapman murder case.
The former assistant to the Duchess of York was found dead in her downtown Dallas apartment with blunt force trauma to her head and neck area. Police arrested her husband, James Michael Patrick, in Austin. He is now in the Dallas County Jail, and his bond was set at $1 million.
Janine's family had always feared this moment. They had suspected James from the beginning, and now their fears had been confirmed. But confirmation didn't bring peace. It only made the loss feel heavier. There was no sense of justice yet, just the unbearable reality that Janine was gone. For her mother, for her sisters, for everyone who loved her. This wasn't the end of their grief. It was just another chapter. The arrest did not bring closure. It only raised more painful questions. Why did it have to come to this? They wondered. Some felt relief that Patrick was behind bars. But relief could never undo the loss. For her mother, for her sisters, this was a new kind of grief. One that was tangled in betrayal. One that would never fully heal. With James Patrick behind bars, the next battle would take place in the courtroom. The legal system was preparing to take its next steps toward justice. But for Janine's family, no amount of justice could ever bring her back.
All rise.
On January 15th, 2025, 16 months after her murder, the trial of James Michael Patrick began in Dallas County Court. The courtroom was silent, yet charged with tension, as Jenean Chapman's family faced the man accused of ending her life. For the first time since her death, they came face to face with James Patrick. But as they searched his face for any sign of remorse, they found nothing. He sat cold, detached, unfeeling. There was no sorrow in his eyes, no guilt, only emptiness. The prosecution wasted no time in presenting the gruesome details of what had happened to Jenean Chapman. She had suffered a brutal beating, with injuries so severe they left her unrecognizable to her grieving family. The autopsy revealed hemorrhaging in her muscles, neck, and eyes, blunt force trauma to her head, lacerations inside her mouth, significant bruising along her neck and face. Her cause of death was determined to be homicidal violence, including strangulation and blunt force trauma. Then came the final blow. Neighbors had heard arguments through the apartment walls leading up to her death. They fought all the time. But then it just went silent, a neighbor testified. The evidence was overwhelming. The defense pushed back. Their strategy? A crime of passion defense. Under Texas law, if a murder is committed in the heat of passion, spurred by an overwhelming emotional reaction, a defendant's charge can be downgraded from first-degree murder to a second-degree felony, reducing the sentence to as little as 2 years in prison. That's exactly what Patrick's legal team hoped for. Taking the stand, he claimed it was not premeditated murder, but an act of self-defense, an emotional reaction in the heat of the moment. His defense strategy aimed to reduce his sentence to just 2 to 20 years, a mere fraction of what a first-degree conviction would carry. But the evidence told a different story. Patrick had been kicked out of Janine's home. He came back. He argued. He escalated. He had time to walk away. He had time to call for help, but he didn't. The jury wasn't convinced. They saw the bruises, the signs of strangulation, the hemorrhaging. They saw the timeline, and Patrick's lack of remorse. The weight of the evidence made his defense impossible to believe. Over 10 days, the trial unfolded with emotional testimonies and intense cross-examinations. After 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. On January 24, 2025, the verdict was read: guilty of murder. Justice had spoken. For Janine's family, it was a moment of relief, justice, and deep sorrow, a confirmation of what they already knew. The sentencing phase immediately followed the verdict. One by one, Janine's family spoke directly to James Patrick, their words seething with fury and heartbreak. They wished him pain and suffering for the rest of his life. They pleaded with the court to hand down the maximum sentence, ensuring that he would never see the outside world again.
I will never forgive you. May you endure a life of perpetual fear and decay, confined to an existence devoid of solace or redemption. I want you to suffer every day for the rest of your life.
You showed no ounce of remorse or emotion towards my sister during the entire trial.
You're a monster, and I will sleep well at night, knowing that you are where you belong, in prison, away from society.
One day, a CO will open your cell, and you will be dead on your metal stone bed. And that will be the end of your story.
Then, for the first time, someone spoke on Patrick's behalf. His mother took the stand, delivering an emotional statement about her son. She expressed her sorrow for Janine's family. She offered heartfelt condolences, a rare moment of grace in an otherwise dark trial. But in the end, the judge sided with the family. Patrick was sentenced to 72 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. Normally, once the trial is over, jurors leave the courtroom. But not this time. They stayed, waiting to hear Patrick's final fate. And when they did, they wept. They hugged Janine's family. The trial provided answers, but also reopened wounds that may never fully heal. Justice had been served. But Jenean Chapman's story, her light, her love, and her legacy will never be forgotten. They mourned with them. Because in those days spent hearing her story, seeing the pain of those who loved her, they had felt her loss too.
My sister was a beacon of light for me. She was a role model. I used to look up to her. I always look up to her as like what I wanted to accomplish in my corporate career. And she's an amazing person, and that's why we're so blindsided about how this happened.
It's hard to wrap our brains around the fact that she's dead, because it's like it didn't look like her. It just seemed like the relationship just wasn't stable. She was all the way around a good person. So this is the last thing that we were just completely blindsided by this, because we did not see this coming. We knew that they had arguments, and that's typical in relationships. It was a bit toxic, but we would never think it would have been taken to this extreme where my sister would ultimately lose her life. I miss her every day. Every day. My sister was a classic domestic abused woman. Don't take anything lightly at all.
What do you think about this tragic case? Jenean Chapman was a woman with ambition, warmth, and a future full of promise. She had built a career, a life, and a reputation. Yet behind closed doors, she was navigating a toxic relationship that would ultimately turn fatal. There were red flags, signs of control, manipulation, and abuse. But like many, Janine hoped for change, hoped for love to triumph over fear. But in the end, hope wasn't enough. The justice system held James Patrick accountable, but it can never undo the pain of what happened. Janine's story is a devastating reminder that intimate partner violence can affect anyone, regardless of success, status, or strength. And that leaving isn't always easy. What do you think drove James Patrick to commit such a heinous act? Do you believe justice was fully served in this case? Why or why not? And more importantly, how can we as a society better support individuals like Janine to prevent tragedies like this? Let's continue this conversation down in the comments section below. As always, I'll meet you there. In these stories, there are no perfect victims, only imperfect individuals navigating different roles in life. Janine was more than her career, more than the tragic circumstances that ended her life. She was a loving daughter, sister, aunt, niece, cousin, and friend to so many who now mourn her loss. She will forever remain in the hearts of those who cherished and loved her, not because she was perfect, but because she was perfectly wonderful in their eyes. This is why I extend my gratitude to the victims for being beacons of love and light, despite any flaws that may emerge from their stories. So thank you, Janine, for being an example of love and light. May you rest in eternal peace.